I was sitting in the airport terminal, checking my phone one last time before boarding. After 10 years of deployments overseas, I was finally coming home for good. Christmas was in 3 days, and I couldn't wait to surprise Linda. We'd been married 32 years, and she'd been so patient through all my tours. My flight to Denver was about to board when my phone buzzed. A text from Linda. My heart jumped with excitement. Maybe she was planning something special for my arrival. I opened the message and felt my world collapse. I won't be here when you arrive. I filed for divorce. Don't contact me. I stared at the screen, reading it again and again. This had to be a mistake. We'd talked just last week about Christmas dinner plans. She'd seemed excited about me coming home. The gate agent called for boarding. Passengers around me gathered their bags and lined up. I sat frozen, my duffel bag at my feet, still staring at those horrible words. "Sir?" A flight attendant touched my shoulder. "Are you boarding?" I looked up, dazed. The terminal was nearly empty. I was the last passenger. "Yeah," I whispered, standing on shaky legs. "Yeah, I'm coming." The 10-hour flight home was the longest of my life. I kept rereading Linda's message, hoping the words would somehow change. They never did. The businessman next to me tried making small talk, but I pretended to sleep. My mind raced through our last conversations. Had I missed something? She'd seemed tired lately, but I thought it was just work stress. She ran a small accounting firm in town and always got busy around tax season. We'd video called twice a week for the past year. She'd shown me the Christmas decorations she'd put up. The tree we'd bought together 5 years ago stood in our living room window, covered in ornaments we'd collected from around the world. How could she have been planning this while smiling at me through the screen? When we landed in Denver, I turned my phone back on. No new messages. Part of me hoped she'd texted to say it was all a misunderstanding, that she'd been hacked or something. Nothing. I grabbed my bags and walked through the airport like a zombie. Other passengers reunited with their families, hugging and laughing. A soldier in uniform got a hero's welcome from his wife and kids. I walked past them all, completely alone. The cab ride to our house took 40 minutes. I stared out the window at the familiar streets of my hometown. Everything looked exactly the same, but somehow different. Like I was seeing it through broken glass. Our neighborhood was decorated for Christmas. Lights twinkled on every house. Kids were building snowmen in their yards. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like arriving at a crime scene. The cab pulled into my driveway. Our house sat dark and empty. No lights, no decorations, no sign of life. The windows that should have glowed with warmth looked cold and dead. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk with my bags. This was the house I'd dreamed about for 10 years. The place I'd pictured every night before falling asleep in some foreign country. Now it looked like a stranger's house. I walked up the front steps and tried my key. It still worked. The door swung open to reveal emptiness. The furniture was gone. The Christmas tree was gone. Even the curtains had been removed. My footsteps echoed in the empty rooms. A faint smell of perfume lingered in the air, not Linda's usual scent. On the kitchen counter sat a single envelope with my name on it. Inside the envelope were divorce papers, official documents with court stamps and legal language I could barely understand. But the message was clear. My marriage was over. I sat on the floor of my empty kitchen and read through every page. Linda was asking for half of everything: the house, my pension, even my savings account. Her signature was already there, neat and precise like always. At the bottom was a lawyer's business card, Peterson and Associates Family Law. I'd never heard of them. I walked through the house again, looking for any sign of our life together. In the master bedroom, even the carpet had been replaced. It was like 32 years of marriage had been erased. But in the back of the hallway closet, I found something she'd missed. A dusty photo album we'd put together years ago. Pictures of our wedding, our honeymoon, holidays with family. As I flipped through the pages, a loose photo fell out. I picked it up and felt my stomach drop. It was Linda with another man. They were sitting close together at what looked like a restaurant. She was wearing the necklace I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. The timestamp on the photo showed a date from 8 months ago. I'd been deployed in Afghanistan then. The man looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. I needed answers. I found the old landline phone in the garage, the only thing Linda had apparently forgotten to disconnect. The voicemail light was blinking. I pressed play. "Hey, beautiful," a man's voice said. "Can't wait for our first Christmas together. You're finally free. I'll pick you up at 7 for dinner. Love you." The voice sent chills down my spine. I knew that voice. It was deeper now, older, but I recognized it. Kyle Denton, my former subordinate from 15 years ago, a guy I'd trained, mentored, and trusted. He'd been a good soldier back then, but he'd always been too interested in other men's wives. I played the message again. "You're finally free." Like I was some kind of prison she'd escaped from. My hands shook as I deleted the message, but not before I recorded it on my phone. Something told me I'd need evidence of everything I was about to discover. I went back to the photo album and looked at the picture again. Now I could see it clearly. Kyle had aged, put on weight, but it was definitely him. How long had this been going on? I drove to the bank first thing in the morning. Our joint account, which should have had about $60,000, showed a balance of $812. The teller, a young woman who couldn't have been older than my daughter, looked sympathetic as she printed out the statements. "Would you like me to highlight the large withdrawals?" she asked. "Please." The highlighted papers told a story I didn't want to believe. Linda had been making withdrawals for years. Always just under $10,000, the amount that would trigger federal reporting requirements. Someone had taught her to be careful. The pattern was clear. Every time I'd sent money home from overseas, she'd kept just enough to pay bills and slowly siphoned off the rest. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" the teller asked. "Actually, yes. Can you check if my wife has any other accounts here?" She typed for a moment, then frowned. "I'm sorry, sir. I can only give information about joint accounts unless you have legal authorization." I thanked her and left. But as I walked to my car, she came running after me. "Sir? I probably shouldn't tell you this, but..." She looked around nervously. "Your wife closed a personal account here last week, a big one." I hired a lawyer that afternoon. Robert Martinez had been recommended by a buddy from my unit who'd gone through his own messy divorce. His office was small but organized, with military commendations on the wall. "This is worse than I thought," he said after reviewing my bank statements. "She's been systematically draining your accounts for years. We can trace where the money went." Within 2 hours, his investigator had found a trail. The money had gone to a secret account Linda had opened 10 years ago. That account had been used to make mortgage payments on a property I'd never heard of. A cabin in the mountains, about an hour outside town. "The deed shows 2 names," Martinez said, sliding the papers across his desk. "Linda Callahan and Kyle Denton." My stomach churned. They'd bought a house together. While I was getting shot at in Afghanistan, they were playing house in the mountains with my money. "There's more," Martinez continued. "According to county records, utilities have been connected to that address for 8 years. They've been living there together while you were deployed." I stared at the address written on the deed. 1247 Pine Ridge Road, a place I'd never seen, bought with money I'd earned getting shot at by terrorists. "What do you want to do?" Martinez asked. "I want to see it." The drive to Pine Ridge Road took me through winding mountain roads I'd never traveled. Snow covered the pine trees, making everything look peaceful and beautiful. It should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like driving to my own execution. The cabin sat at the end of a long driveway, surrounded by tall trees. It was bigger than I'd expected, a 2-story log home with a wraparound porch and mountain views. Christmas lights hung from the eaves. I parked across the street and just stared. This was the life Linda had built without me. While I was sleeping in tents and eating military rations, she was here with Kyle, decorating for Christmas. An older woman came out of the house next door to get her mail. She noticed me sitting in my car and walked over. "You okay, honey?" she asked. "You look lost." "I'm looking for my wife," I said. "Linda Callahan. She lives here." The woman's face changed. "Oh," she said quietly. "You must be her ex-husband. I'm sorry, I didn't know she was married to 2 men. My blood froze. 2 men? "Well, she's been living here with Kyle for years, but last month she mentioned having to deal with her ex-husband coming home from overseas." She paused. Wait, if you're just getting home, then you're not her ex yet, are you? The neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, invited me inside for coffee. Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon and home-cooked meals, everything my empty house didn't. I'm so sorry, she said, pouring coffee into a mug that said, "World's Best Grandma." I had no idea she was still married. She and Kyle have been together since I moved here 8 years ago. 8 years. Not a recent affair, but a long-term relationship that had been going on for most of my last deployment cycle. Did she ever mention me? I asked. Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. She said her ex-husband was military, sent money sometimes, but they'd been separated for years. Kyle talks about her first marriage like it was ancient history. She walked to her window and pointed at the cabin. They act like a married couple. Kyle mows the lawn, Linda tends the garden. They have barbecues in the summer, host Christmas parties. Christmas parties. While I was spending Christmas in a military-based cafeteria, Linda was throwing parties with my replacement. There's something else, Mrs. Patterson said hesitantly. Last month I saw Linda at the bank with papers. She was crying, and Kyle was comforting her. She kept saying something about, when Jim comes home, everything will change. They'd known I was coming. This wasn't a sudden decision. It was a plan. Back at my lawyer's office, Martinez had more bad news. His investigator had discovered that Linda and Kyle had been using my identity for financial transactions. Look at this, he said, spreading documents across his desk. A car loan in your name, taken out while you were overseas. Credit cards you never applied for. Someone's been forging your signature. The handwriting looked close to mine, but not quite right. A skilled forgery, probably practiced over time. This isn't just infidelity, Martinez said. This is fraud, identity theft, possibly federal crime since it involved military pay and crossed state lines. He leaned back in his chair. Jim, they've been stealing from you for years. This was never about love or loneliness. This was a long-term financial crime. I thought about all the extra shifts I'd worked, all the hazard pay I'd earned in dangerous places. Every dollar I'd sent home had funded their fake life together. What do we do? I asked. We document everything. And I'm recommending you hire a private investigator, someone who can dig deeper than we can. Martinez handed me a business card. Her name's Sarah Chen. She's ex-military police, now private. If there's more to find, she'll find it. I took the card. How much more could there be? Martinez shook his head. In cases like this, there's always more. Sarah Chen met me at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of direct gaze that told me she'd seen plenty of bad situations. I've been reviewing your case, she said, pulling out a tablet. Your lawyer sent me the basics, but I've already found something interesting. She showed me photos on her screen. I drove by the cabin yesterday. There's a security camera system. Pretty sophisticated for a mountain retreat. The photos showed cameras mounted under the eaves, covering every angle of the property. The interesting thing is, they're not connected to any security company. They're storing footage locally, probably on a hard drive system inside the house. I leaned forward. Can you get access to that footage? Not legally, while they're living there, but... She smiled slightly. I have contacts in the tech world, people who specialize in recovering digital evidence. She swiped to another photo. There's something else. See that truck in the driveway? I looked. A red pickup truck I didn't recognize. That's registered to Kyle Denton, but according to the DMV, it was purchased with a loan guaranteed by someone named James Callahan. My name. My credit. For a truck I'd never seen. How many loans are there? I asked. Sarah's expression turned grim. We're still counting. 3 days later, Sarah called with an update. I got access to some of the security footage. You need to see this. We met at her office, a small space above a computer repair shop. She had multiple monitors set up, showing different camera angles from the cabin. This footage is from 2 weeks ago, she said, clicking play. On the screen, I watched Linda and Kyle loading boxes into his truck. They were clearly in a hurry, looking around nervously as they worked. Watch this part, Sarah said, fast-forwarding. Kyle carried out a large bag and threw it into what looked like a burn pile behind the cabin. Linda followed with another bag. As the camera caught her profile, I could see she was crying. What's in the bags? I asked. Sarah zoomed in. Hard to tell for certain, but look at this. She paused the video as something metallic fell out of one bag. Even through the grainy security footage, I could see it clearly. A military medal, one of my military medals. They were burning your personal belongings, Sarah said quietly, trying to erase evidence that you ever existed. I watched my wife of 32 years throw my service medals into a fire like they were garbage. There's more footage, Sarah said. But first, there's something else you need to know. Your wife contacted you yesterday, Sarah said. I frowned. No, she didn't. I haven't heard from her since that first text. Sarah showed me her tablet. This is a record of text messages sent from her phone number to yours. She sent this message yesterday at 3:47 p.m. The message read, "Let's do this civilly. Come to the cabin on Christmas Eve. No lawyers, just us." I never received that, I said, because it never reached your phone. I've been monitoring communications as part of the investigation. Someone intercepted it. She pulled up another screen. Your phone service has been redirected through a forwarding system. Someone's been controlling your communications. The full picture was becoming clear. This wasn't just an affair or even simple fraud. This was a carefully planned scheme to isolate me and control the narrative. They want to meet at the cabin? I asked. It looks that way. The question is, why? They've already filed for divorce, stolen your money, and destroyed your belongings. What more could they want? I thought about it. Maybe they want to make sure I don't fight the divorce. Get me to sign something. Sarah nodded. Or maybe they're planning something else entirely. She leaned forward. Jim, I think you should go to that meeting, but not alone. Christmas Eve morning, I drove to the cabin with Sarah following in her own car. She'd park down the road and monitor everything through surveillance equipment. If anything goes wrong, I'll be recording, she told me through my earpiece. Stay calm, let them talk, and try to get them to admit things on record. My hands were shaking as I parked in the driveway. The cabin looked peaceful in the morning snow, smoke rising from the chimney. It looked like a Christmas card. Linda opened the door before I could knock. She'd aged since our last video call. Her hair was different, shorter and dyed blonde. She was wearing clothes I'd never seen before, expensive looking. Jim, she said, like we were old friends meeting for lunch. Come in. Kyle was sitting in the living room, drinking coffee from a mug that said "World's Best Dad." He'd put on weight and lost most of his hair, but he still had that smug expression I remembered from when he was under my command. Hey, Sarge, he said, using my old rank like this was a friendly reunion. The living room was decorated for Christmas. A tree stood in the corner, covered with ornaments. I recognized some of them, ones Linda and I had bought together years ago. Coffee? Linda asked. No, I said. Let's just get this over with. Look, Jim, Linda said, settling into a chair across from me. I know this is hard, but we've grown apart. You've been gone so long, we became different people. Kyle leaned back on the couch, completely relaxed. No hard feelings, man. Sometimes these things just happen. I looked around the room at the life they'd built with my money. How long? I asked. What do you mean? Linda said. How long have you two been together? Linda and Kyle exchanged glances. Does it matter? She said. It matters to me. Kyle laughed. Come on, Sarge. You were never here anyway. Linda was lonely. I was there for her. With my money, I said. Linda's face hardened. That was our money. I managed the household while you were playing soldier. Playing soldier. 30 years of military service, and she called it playing. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. I think there are some things we need to discuss. Linda's eyes fixed on the folder. What's that? Evidence, I said calmly. Kyle sat up straighter. Evidence of what? I opened the folder and pulled out the bank statements. Evidence that you've been stealing from me for years. Linda's face went pale. This isn't stealing, Linda said, but her voice was shaky now. We were married. I had a right to that money. I pulled out the property deed. Did you have a right to buy a house with another man using my credit? Kyle stood up. Now wait a minute. Sit down, I said, and something in my voice made him obey. 30 years of command training doesn't just disappear. I spread more documents on the coffee table. Car loans in my name, credit cards I never applied for, utilities connected using my social security number. Linda was staring at the papers like they were snakes. That's identity theft, I continued. A federal crime. You can't prove anything, Kyle said, but he didn't sound confident anymore. I smiled for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Actually, I can. The front door opened and Sarah walked in, showing her private investigator badge. Sorry I'm late, she said pleasantly. I was just finishing up the surveillance footage review. Linda looked like she might faint. Kyle jumped to his feet again. Who the hell is this? He demanded. Sarah Chen, private investigator, she said, pulling out her tablet. I've been documenting your activities for the past 2 weeks. Sarah set her tablet on the coffee table, showing the security footage of Linda and Kyle burning my belongings. Destruction of personal property, she said matter-of-factly. Federal mail tampering, since some of those items were military commendations sent through postal service. Linda found her voice. You can't use that footage. You were trespassing. Actually, Sarah said, I accessed it remotely. Your security system isn't as secure as you thought. She swiped to another video. This is particularly interesting. The footage showed Kyle at a computer, apparently working on documents. Linda stood behind him, pointing at the screen. Looks like document forgery in progress, Sarah said. We've also recovered deleted files from your computer showing practice signatures. Kyle's face was red now. This is harassment. We want you to leave. I don't think so, Sarah said. She pulled out a different badge. I'm also a licensed process server. Kyle Denton, you're being served with a subpoena to appear in federal court. She handed him an official-looking document. The U.S. Attorney's Office wants to discuss your fraudulent use of a serviceman's identity. Kyle stared at the papers like they were on fire. Linda Callahan, Sarah continued, handing Linda her own set of documents. You're being served for identity theft, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. This is insane, Linda said, but her hands were shaking as she read the legal papers. Jim, we can work this out. We don't need lawyers in courts. We needed lawyers in courts the moment you started forging my signature, I said. Kyle was pacing now, reading his subpoena. I want to call my lawyer. Good idea, Sarah said. You're going to need one. She turned to Linda. There's something else you should know. The military has opened its own investigation. Linda looked confused. What does the military have to do with this? Kyle accessed classified personnel files to get Jim's personal information, Sarah explained. That's a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, even for retired personnel. Kyle stopped pacing. That's not. I didn't. We have the computer logs, Sarah said. Your retirement benefits are being frozen pending the outcome of the investigation. I watched Kyle's face as the reality hit him. No retirement pay, no benefits, no security, just like Linda had taken from me. But wait, Sarah said, checking her phone. There's more. She showed us a new message. The local sheriff's department just executed a search warrant on this property. They're looking for additional evidence of fraud. Through the window, we could see police cars pulling into the driveway. The next few hours were a blur of uniforms and badges. Sheriff's deputies, federal agents, military investigators. The cabin that had been Linda and Kyle's private paradise became a crime scene. I sat in my truck, watching investigators carry out boxes of evidence. Sarah sat beside me, taking notes. They found the computer Kyle was using for the forgeries, she said, plus a filing cabinet full of documents with your forged signature. Through the window, I could see Linda talking to a federal agent. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Kyle was in handcuffs, sitting in the back of a sheriff's car. What happens now? I asked. They'll be charged formally within a few days. The prosecutor thinks it's a strong case. They have video evidence, financial records, computer files, and witnesses. I thought about Mrs. Patterson next door, probably watching all this chaos from her kitchen window. What about the money? I asked. Most of it's recoverable. The house, the truck, the bank accounts. It's all evidence now. You'll get it back eventually. A military police officer knocked on my truck window. I rolled it down. Sergeant Major Callahan, Colonel Williams would like to speak with you. Sarah squeezed my shoulder. This is the good part, she said. Colonel Williams was the same age as me, with gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd seen combat. We talked in the front seat of his staff car while the investigation continued around us. I wanted to apologize personally, he said. Kyle Denton was our responsibility, even in retirement. We should have caught this sooner. How did you find out about the file access? I asked. Your investigator contacted our cybersecurity unit. They ran a trace and found multiple unauthorized accesses to your personnel file over the past 5 years. 5 years. He'd been planning this for a long time. Kyle knew your deployment schedules, your pay grades, your personal information. He used that knowledge to build this fraud scheme. The colonel handed me an official letter. The Army is conducting a full review of your case. Any financial losses related to Kyle's actions will be compensated by the military. I stared at the letter. After weeks of feeling helpless and betrayed, someone was finally standing up for me. There's something else, the colonel said. Your service record has been reviewed for any other potential security breaches. Everything else is clean. He paused. Sergeant Major, I know this has been hell. But you did everything right. You served with honor, and this doesn't change that. For the first time in weeks, I felt like a soldier again, instead of a victim. The court case moved quickly. With video evidence and computer records, Linda and Kyle's lawyers advised them to plea bargain rather than go to trial. Kyle pled guilty to identity theft, mail fraud, and unauthorized access to military records. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution. Linda pled guilty to conspiracy and fraud charges. She got 2 years in prison, but the judge allowed her to serve it on house arrest because of her age and lack of prior criminal record. I sat in the courtroom during her sentencing, watching the woman I'd been married to for 32 years learn her fate. She looked smaller somehow, older and defeated. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Linda stood up. I want to apologize to my husband, she said, her voice barely audible. I was lonely and scared, and I made terrible choices. I know sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. The judge nodded and delivered the sentence. As Linda was led away, she looked back at me once. I didn't wave or smile or show any emotion. I just watched her go. Later, in the parking lot, my lawyer handed me keys to my truck, the one Kyle had bought with my credit. It's yours now, Martinez said, along with the cabin and everything else they bought with your money. Returning to my empty house felt different now. It wasn't the scene of a betrayal anymore. It was just an empty house that I could fill however I wanted. I spent the next few months sorting through legal paperwork and insurance claims. The Army compensation helped, but mostly I was focused on starting over. I sold the cabin. Too many bad memories, and I didn't need a mountain retreat anyway. The money went to a new account that only I could access. I also sold our old house. 32 years of marriage memories, but they all felt contaminated now. A fresh start meant a clean slate. With the money from both properties, plus my military pension and savings that had been recovered, I bought a small ranch about an hour outside town. Just a simple house on 20 acres with a view of the mountains. I adopted a dog from the local shelter, a German Shepherd mix named Duke, who'd been turned in by owners who couldn't handle him. We understood each other. The peace and quiet took some getting used to. After years of military bases and the stress of the legal case, having nothing but space and silence felt strange at first. But strange in a good way. 1 year later, I was working in my garden when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up to see Sarah Chen getting out of her sedan. "Hope you don't mind me stopping by," she said. I was in the area. We sat on my porch, drinking coffee and watching Duke chase rabbits in the yard. "How are Linda and Kyle doing?" I asked. "Kyle's still in federal prison. Word is he's not adjusting well to being told what to do," Sarah said with a slight smile. "And Linda?" "House arrest ended last month. She moved to another state, lives with her sister now, works at a grocery store from what I hear." I nodded. I didn't feel angry anymore, just sad for the waste of it all. "What about you?" Sarah asked. "Any regrets about the way it all went down?" I thought about it. No regrets about seeking justice, but I wish it hadn't been necessary. Sarah finished her coffee and stood to leave. "For what it's worth, you handled it with more class than most people would have." After she drove away, I sat on the porch until sunset, thinking about the past year. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also freed me from a life that was built on lies. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. There's a difference. 6 months later, I got a letter with no return address. The handwriting was Linda's. "Jim," it began, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to tell you something. I was wrong about everything. I was lonely while you were gone, but that doesn't excuse what I did. You chose duty over me, but that's who you are. Someone who keeps their promises and serves something bigger than themselves. I used to be proud of that. I should have remembered. The letter went on for 3 pages, detailing her regrets and asking for forgiveness she knew she didn't deserve. I don't expect you to write back, it ended. I just wanted you to know that I remember who you really are, even if I forgot for a while. I hope you find happiness because you deserve it more than anyone I know. I read the letter twice, then walked to my fireplace. Duke looked up from his bed as I knelt down and fed the pages to the flames. Some chapters of life need to be closed completely before new ones can begin. I watched the last piece of paper turn to ash, then went outside to tend my garden. This morning I stood on my porch watching the sun rise over the mountains. Duke sat beside me, his tail occasionally thumping against the wooden floor. The ranch was quiet, except for the sound of wind through the pine trees and birds calling to each other across the valley. In a few hours, I'd drive into town to help out at the Veterans Center, where I volunteer twice a week. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter in California. She was coming for Christmas this year, bringing her kids. We'd rebuild our holiday traditions here, in this place that belonged only to us. The betrayal that had once seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something better. A life without lies, without people who saw my service as an inconvenience rather than a sacrifice. I thought about Kyle, probably waking up in a prison cell right now. And Linda, starting another day at a job that barely paid enough to cover rent. They'd gotten justice. But more importantly, I'd gotten peace. Sometimes justice isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply learning to live well without the people who never deserved you in the first place. Duke stretched and wandered off to investigate something in the yard. I finished my coffee and went inside to start another day of the life I'd built from the ashes of the old one. A life that was finally completely mine.